This podcast is made possible by High Radius.
Hello, this is Christian Geyer, CFO and COO of ActiveNav, and you're listening to the CFO Thought Leader Podcast.
This is episode 811.
Than they should. But what I learned when I stepped into my first CFO role is if you're going to scale a business, putting system, process, dashboarding, and technology in place in a repeatable way. And one of my favorite phrases is it scalable? Is it portable? If you can't scale it with the business and you can't port it to a business you acquire, it's not a good system or technology. And so that is definitely something we're focusing on right now. That's something over the next year that we will really work on, is getting a couple seats filled in the team that is needed for growth, and then getting good baseline systems in place, getting good reporting, because it was and still is in some ways very Excel driven, but we're very rapidly moving toward a much more automated set. So yeah, big focus there.
Hi, it's Jack. On today's show, we speak with Jason Keene, CFO of Mills in Nebraska. As our listeners know well, among the career milestones our CFO guests like to highlight for us, there's little question. Examples of driving business growth are a perennial favorite. However, inside the construction realm, where multi-generational family-owned businesses survive and thrive, growth goals are often tempered by enduring organizational cultures that frequently cast a cautious eye on those who champion change. Enter Jason Keene, a technology-minded finance leader who says he champions smart growth, an approach that keeps a close eye on profits as well as revenue. CFO Jason Keene explains after this. Did you know more than 60% of B2B invoices are paid late? Well, then it should come as little surprise that the priorities of finance leaders have shifted towards accelerating cash recovery and scaling business growth. To address this issue, High Radius now connects your credit, billing and invoicing, cash application deductions, and collections into a single business process and empowers your finance team to champion your business's high-performance culture. More than 700 of the world's leading companies have transformed the office of their CFO with High Radius. Unlock working capital and reduce bad debt with the best AI-powered accounts receivable management software. To learn more, visit us at highradius.com. Hello, we're speaking with Jason Keene, CFO of Mills in Nebraska. Jason, welcome.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me today.
So Jason, we always begin by having our guests look back for us and sharing some of those experiences they feel prepared them to be a finance leader. What would come to mind for you?
Yeah, my past's a little interesting. So I know a lot of finance leaders come out being CPAs and sort of living the accounting world, right? That's where a lot of them start. That wasn't my beginning. My start was actually in technology. So it's ended up serving me really well, but I ended up starting out with a degree in technology that really helped me shape my understanding of the future state of where technology was going to go. And that led me down so many interesting, unique paths. So, for example, when I was finding my first internship out of college, did I ever think of the construction industry, which I'm in now? And I know we'll probably get to in a little while, but no, the construction industry was not somebody anybody really thinks about going into. But a professor connected me with the company that I ended up spending a decade with. And they connected me because I was trying to do research with them on a technology called RFID, which is pretty commonplace at this point, but back then it wasn't. And it just happened that one of that professor's students was one of the owners of a construction company, and he was thinking about, can we embed RFID in asphalt so that we can track its useful life and how it's going? So I went in there as an IT intern and ended up, first thing I did, repairing dot matrix printers, which don't even really exist anymore, but that's sort of where I started. Uh, the beauty of that, and I think how that prepared me to be a finance and accounting leader, was it let me get into a business where I was working directly with the ownership and experience so many things.
Can I
And
ask you something?
sure,
That's it. So you're dealing right with the owners, and it seems rather entrepreneurial.
yeah,
You mentioned that how RFID
yeah,
was going to be useful in tracking the useful life of asphalt.
yeah.
That sounds interesting. What is that? What exactly is happening there?
So and it's never played out. So it's a great idea that never happened, right? So the thought was,
Well, like most entrepreneurial ideas. Okay, I was just thinking that might have been the kernel of his business, but if not,
no, no,
we
it was
don't have to go down
so that company was a 100-year-old asphalt company. It'd been around a long time, fourth generation family owned business. He just happened to be a bit of a technologist, and that's how we connected.
All right. Now, you begin in, I don't know how you like to express it, the technology piece of this,
Yep.
and the segue that I'd love to zero in on when you realize it's about the numbers, or when someone
Yeah.
looks at you because, okay, Jason's got the numbers. Somewhere along the line that happened, but we're going to get there. So I
Oh,
apologize for interrupting. I'll let you go on. Yeah.
no worries. You stole my thunder because that was my next piece. So, like I said, I was repairing dot matrix printers, doing stuff like that, and I realized, this is not the piece of the business. I like technology. I like analytics. I like the quantitative aspect of it. Um, but I don't have the finance and accounting background. I've got technology background. So I went and got a master's in finance. The timing on that was terrible. I finished it off in '09, right during the banking crisis, thinking I was going to go into banking. And you know what? There wasn't any banking jobs. So that's sort of how I twisted from technology to the accounting finance world. And I got lucky that the company that I'd interned with, the company's based out of Memphis, Tennessee. It's a company called Lehman Roberts Company, 100-year-old company, great, great place. Um, and I came out of grad school and they actually needed me to come back in because they were putting a new ERP in place. And so my background of technology and accounting blended perfectly. So went back to them, spent a decade with them. That really shaped the foundation of the leader and the accounting person I am today. And I say that because I got to see in a company that was going through a generational ownership change, was going through a modernization of technology, was going through a modernization of culture. And I saw it done really well. I saw a company over 10 years that had great employee retention and attraction. I saw a company over 10 years that took the same level of top line. They weren't growth focused, but increased the bottom line dramatically just by making smart business decisions. And I think that tremendously set me up for the perspective of growth is good, but growth at growth's sake alone is not. And so that really built some of my accounting background. I got up to being corporate controller there, and it's a family owned business. So growing from there was going to be hard for a while. And so that's what made me sort of say, okay, I really want to be a CFO in a company. Construction companies don't tend to be multi-billion-dollar massive companies. They tend to be small, mid-size. When I was saying small, mid-size, 100 million to 500 million, right?
Yeah,
So
can I ask you again what you shared so far? I really enjoy because it's so rare that the notion of family-owned companies. And the earlier company you mentioned was quite old as well. This one is 100 years old. Are they passing the generation to the third generation as you arrive, or is
fourth.
it?
So same company. So the company I interned at, I went off to grad school and I ended up coming back to. So that was sort of my first company, period. Fourth generation. They've been around a long, long time.
And it's always been construction, Lehman Roberts now, and that's in the Memphis area. Is that right?
Construction and surface mining. So they also mined rock. So they owned a lot of the value chain, right? All the way from the raw material to putting it down on the road, which has some competitive advantages.
Now, and I only do this for companies that are on, you can imagine, we talk to a lot of high tech firms that are 10 years or younger, but the notion of a company that's endured for over 100 years always is interesting. What was the original product that this company made? I'm putting you on the spot here, but I imagine you might know that. I don't know.
They started in the asphalt industry. They've always been an asphalt company. So I think way back in the 20s and 30s, they would have started in, I think it was 1939. So right at the end of the 30s, it was asphalt. So they've always
Wow.
been asphalt.
I have to believe it was really asphalt was something new back then. It was something
It was.
being formulated. Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
it was very, and that was back when the highway systems were getting put in, right? So that's when asphalt really started coming around.
And then that business probably after World War II just blossomed, yeah, as really the national highway systems were put into place. All right,
Exactly.
I am once more getting off track here, but
No worries.
you enter there as a newbie finance person, fresh out of business school,
Mhm.
and you climb the ranks. You advance into a controllership
That's
role.
correct. The corporate controller. So again, not a huge company, so there's only one controller. So the corporate controller, yeah.
Now, can I ask, and I'm getting ahead of myself here, but this is a family run company, and just to reflect a little on myself, one of my best experiences that I had in entirely different career, but in journalism, was in a family owned company. I want to ask you: have you remained in family owned companies, or was this unique? Again, 10 years of your life in a family owned company.
Every company I've been in has had some family ownership. One of them had some private equity involved, so that's a whole different animal. But most of them family owned. All but one of them has been 80 plus years old. So I've worked for a lot of, and that's something unique in the construction industry is you have a lot of this longevity. It also tends to be an industry that lags other industries. So you said you talk with a lot of technology companies, right? So they're going to be much more ahead of the curve. What I'm talking about, we changed ERPs at that company. That was in 2009, and they were moving from a floppy-based DOS system to a modern SQL architecture ERP. So only a little over 15 years ago were they transitioning from dot matrix printers and floppy drives. So that industry tends to lag, which has been advantageous to me with my technology background to really help companies move their technology aspects forward.
Yeah. So even in your role as controllership, did you emerge as a sort of a technology champion, someone who is willing to try new tools and different
Yes,
pieces of technology? Yeah.
that's sort of the combination of analytics and technology has sort of become what I'm known for. So there's an organization called the Construction Financial Management Association, which is a group of construction accountants across the country, about 9,000 of us. And I speak at the national level there around technology in the construction industry and how it ties into CFOs, because that's just sort of something that I gravitated toward and it's really stuck.
Did you originally, when you're in this family-owned company and you're not yet a controller, are you part of this association back then?
Yes. So that's another key piece of my story there. That company, Lehman Roberts, discovered CFMA and let me get plugged into it. And that was something I learned there. They invested into me as a young professional, gave me the opportunity to go learn there. So that's where I was able to build out a lot of accounting related knowledge and also really form some mentorships, serve at a national level, build leadership skills that in a smaller company like that, you weren't going to get, which prepared me to be controller there pretty quickly. I mean, I was a controller at that company before I was 30. So it allowed me to really move much more quickly than I would have in a super large organization and also round out some of those leadership skills. So yeah, they were willing to invest.
And so, and likewise, it seems like the family-owned company encouraged you to be part of this because it knew perhaps you would find mentors there that maybe didn't reside in-house, and at the same time, you'd find technology-minded peers there, people
Yes.
like you who are pointing towards technology, maybe a little further down the road, actually, too, having adopted some of the tools. How am I doing? Am I close or?
Yeah. Oh, you're spot on. I mean, that, and then when we implemented the new ERP, they encouraged me to go to the conference for that. It was a construction specific ERP. Be involved there. Ended up serving on the advisory board for that software firm and all that stuff. So they really did encourage go out, really understand it, be an expert. And the investing in that, they benefited too. I benefited greatly, but they benefited also from what they were letting me learn and apply to the business.
Now, you had joined, and again, I'm slowing you down here, so I apologize, but I'm curious. We all know construction is very much related to the economy.
Hmm.
And you join, as you explained, out of business school. There weren't jobs in banking, but you go into construction, which we have to believe there were some soft years there as well. Or did you? What did you learn with this chapter, as many years as you were there, about the construction industry and the economic sort of pendulum that exists, perhaps there?
So I went back to Lehman Roberts right after grad school, '09, right during the downturn. Most of that type of roadways is governmentally funded, so it lags the economy a little bit. So it was still doing all right. And they kept their size at a smart level and didn't try and grow during that tough period. They used that as a period of building their foundation so that when the economy started coming back, that's when they really kicked in the profitability. And so, what I think I learned from it is, and every construction industry is different, right? So, if you're looking at a vertical GC type contractor, they're going to be much more tied to the economy because it's tied to private clients. But with government, funding is a little bit different in the mechanism. So, there's always going to be some work, and it's going to trail the economy a few years. But what I learned was when things are down, you use that as a time to really shrink in, control, find efficiencies, be ready to tackle the opportunity. I think it's Warren Buffett that talks about, going and finding the opportunities when there's blood in the streets. Well, this company found the opportunities and getting themselves ready for when the world is ready to take on growth again. And I think that's one of the biggest things I picked up is timing and really being smart about investments.
Yeah. And what would you, I'm going to make this a very broad question, but when it comes to growth, what are the expectations of a company this size? I mean, again, we talk to so many tech players that blow things out of the water in terms of what their expectations in growth are. But 100-year-old company, construction, Heartland, Memphis, Tennessee, what are the expectations for the growth? And you've already sort of indicated this is a practical approach to business. But what would you tell us?
Go a little bit farther down my timeline in a minute. You'll hear about where I joined some construction companies that were high growth. But
Oh,
this one was about wise growth. So focusing on the bottom rather than the top. And their top line did move, but they weren't going 100% growth year over year or even 50%. It was about taking the dollars they were earning and increasing the bottom line by 10 to 20%, which they did very effectively. And they had, family owned business, very family focused. So for them, being on the road and traveling and growing geographically, which is part of what you'd have to do to grow that business dramatically, wasn't going to make sense. So they were focused on growing the bottom line and maintaining their market share where they were at. So that was really what it's more about for them. So every family owned business is going to be different based off of, it's not a publicly traded company where you're looking for quarter to quarter earnings. It's more about the long term and the sustainability for the family that drives it. And so some families want high growth, some don't.
and as you choose to move on, and again, you were the controller. Why is it time to leave? Is it because you're looking for that more senior role, or what
Yeah,
compels you to move on?
I really wanted to get into really driving and leading the organization. I was in a lot of ways and applying that at a higher level, what I'd learned. And I knew at Lehman Roberts that opportunity would come, but it'd be a long time. So it was just the right time to move on. It was the right time to find the next thing. And my family sort of wanted to get to Florida. And so we were looking for opportunities down there. So that sort of led me to my next big learning piece, which is the next company I ended up was a larger a construction company, and I had to be careful sharing top line numbers. Obviously, these are all privately held companies, so it's not like a publicly traded. We're like, oh, we're 2 billion top line. So I'll definitely work in percentages for you, but I'll have to be a little vague on the top lines. So larger than the last company I've been at by about 2x. So this is the next company I joined, and this is a bridge builder. So a lot. construction industry is very capex intensive, but this one's even more capex intensive because you have multi-million-dollar cranes. And so they were a bridge builder, another family-owned business, another 100-year-old company that had recently, in the last 5 years, generationally changed ownership. And this company wanted to grow. So when I joined them, they were twice as big as the company I've been at, but the administrative functions of the organization were needed to be built out for the growth they wanted. So to give you perspective on growth, in 3 years, this company grew 2.5 times the size from when I joined it. It scaled from a couple states to 6 to 7 states. So it did really big growth. Because when you're looking at the bridge building world, it's large projects. So you're picking up a project here, you're picking up a project there. So what I learned in this role, and I think what really happened here is I was stepping into my first CFO role, is the things I'd seen in the first company from building great process, team, and scale had to be done at a much, much more rapid pace because we were growing like crazy. And so we had to build out an HR function, a finance team, really flesh out our IT team, all those things at a much more rapid level. And that really helped me for the first time be sort of the top level leader driving a lot of those systems, process, and technology that went with it. I think the thing I learned from this one was you can only scale system, process, and technology so quickly without burning people out. And I learned that the hard way in some ways. Not everybody wants to run as fast as I do. And so that was one of my biggest takeaways from this company is high growth requires high effort. And if you haven't established that foundation up front, then it's hard to scale it quickly. If you haven't established, we'll use a construction analogy. If you haven't established the foundation for a house, don't throw up the frame yet because it isn't going to stand well. And we got the foundation built, but it was much, much more painful to do when a company's growing that quickly. Lehman Roberts, they got the foundation in place beforehand. At this company, it wasn't. They had a good foundation. They've been around for a long time, but for the growth that was coming, it wasn't ready for that. So we had to really run quickly to get system and process in place.
I guess it sounded like the decision to go to Florida was as much personal as it was professional.
Yep.
And I'm curious if did you work with a recruiter? And what's interesting here is you took your skill set, identified other construction opportunities, perhaps one would imagine, and you stepped in to what would be looks like a more senior role.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know, LinkedIn's not always accurate, but the role that you step into is both CIO as well as controller. So we see how your technology expertise is also playing a role. I mean, that
Yes.
company must have been great. We got not only a controller but a tech wise individual. How am I doing? Am I close to?
Yes. So, in a lot of ways, I was acting as CFO. So, the gentleman who was the CFO, who had been an operational leader, was a year out from retirement. So, I was under his wing in some ways. He wasn't a traditionally trained CFO. So, I was under his wing learning a lot more of the operations aspect of that business and already doing all that CFO. So, again, in these SaaS companies, CFO means a lot of hats. It means accounting, it means finance, HR, marketing, sometimes risk and safety, IT. So, you have to understand a lot of it. It's not just, forecasting and making sure the books are closed. There's a lot of extra pieces. So in that CIO controller role, I was in some ways already acting as CFO.
When we see people move around the country, it's interesting. We see people who start as technology companies down in Austin and
Mm,
they try to jump up to Silicon Valley. Sometimes it works effectively. Maybe there's a recruiter involved. You do it moving down to Florida for maybe a better lifestyle. I don't know. But was there a recruiter involved that helped you do that, or did you do that sort of on your own?
Yeah, I had reached out in my network to see if I could find the right thing and hadn't. And so, yes, a recruiter did end up being sort of the funnel to finding that opportunity. I had talked to several of them when I knew it was the time to find the next thing, and I'd wanted to stay in the construction industry. I fell in love with it. So, and again, I sort of targeted that area of the country because we knew our family wanted to sort of be in that area. So, yeah, that drove that in a lot of ways. But the recruiter really helped find the opportunity at the end of the day.
And again, you've emphasized that there was sort of a different growth mindset here. This was about growth.
Whereas the last company, I thought it was interesting. The founders, the family, wanted to, didn't want to be on the road traveling or cutting deals to open up new markets
Mhm.
necessarily. They wanted to grow just in the immediate area or the larger metro area, I
Yeah.
suppose.
But circling back on that job, it really let me step into my full first time CFO role and really learn how to scale something, right, in a quick way. And I think what I learned on that one is a little bit of the lack of work life balance, because when you're scaling geographically like that we talked about, um, it gets hard to spend enough time with the family. And I have little kids at that point and a wife. And so that became the challenge. And that's really what led me to leave there. Great company. I still stay in contact with them today. They're still doing great things and still building bridges and roads all over the place. And well, I guess one other unique thing about that job that I hadn't experienced before was there was a union company and a non-union company. I never dealt with the union side before, so exposure to union, that was a new realm that I'd never experienced. So I learned a lot through that. I think there's great value in both open and union shops, and got to see the why on both of them, which I'd never seen before, because in the southern part of the country you just don't have a lot of union labor. But that company had a Midwest operation. It actually had founded out of the Midwest, and then the owners had moved to Florida and opened up that aspect of the business. So it was unique in that regards. I got 3 years in that business and realized I'm traveling 20 plus weeks out of the year. I have a young family. I need to find something more localized again and really focus back on the family. So that led me to, and that job was in Jacksonville, Florida, we talked about. So that ended up where I ended up going and working for a company in Orlando, Florida. And that was a great experience as well. I learned a lot from it. I took the job because it was a regional contractor focused in Florida. And I knew the owner well and wanted to work with him. But that's the one that had private equity backing in it. So what I learned from this one, I learned about scaling a company, right? And private equity is going to want to scale. That comes with it. But this is really the first exposure to as close to public practice as I've ever been, or public world. And that is, private equity is going to have a certain type of reporting and expectations that you really have to meet. So it helped me really sharpen the quantitative, the forecasting skills to a whole nother level. And that was important. I think that really helped build out that skill set at that company. And I only spent a little bit over a year and a half there. And the reason for that was I had taken that job to scale back the work life a little bit, right? And quickly realized private equity backed company, you're not going to scale the work life back a little bit. So that's led me to where I am today, because I get to sort of have that same type of smaller mid-sized business, regionalized, focusing on the family and the current state of the career, with some of a little less pressure than was being driven through a private equity backed company.
Well, that gives us a little bit of detail behind Mills in Nebraska, but tell us something more about it. I think you mentioned, how Lehman was a lot of roads and highway building. I think another company you mentioned was about building bridges. What is the sort of the specialization, if there is one, that Mills in Nebraska is known for?
Yeah, so Mills in Nebraska is a 90-year-old company. It actually started out as Central Florida Lumber. It was a wood lumber company. And as it changed generational hands, one of the side arms of the business was in the door manufacturing and install aspect. So very niche focus of the business, right? So metal doors, wood doors, manufacturing those and then installing them in more of a B2B business type environment. So don't picture home builders or picture, you walking as an individual and getting a door and having it installed. It's more the large Amazon warehouses, hotels, when you have a lot of volume. So Mills in Nebraska, a 90-year-old company that really specializes in manufacturing doors and hardware and then installing those with different general contractors and private owners. And again, family-owned business that's really decided it's ready for growth in a smart way. And I think that's back to sort of what I've learned in my skills over time is not growing. We don't want to grow 100% year over year, but growing 10 to 15%. but part of what they brought me in to do was to get that foundation in place, which I've done 3 times now, of structuring a company to be ready for growth, putting the right type of team in place, and preparing them for that smart growth so that both the top line and the bottom line grow together.
Now, is Mills in Nebraska? Is it serving? Is it Florida, or is it multi-state, or what's its geography like?
Great question. So we are customer driven. We do have a counter sale where somebody can come in and buy doors and then go take them and install them themselves. But we're customer driven, so that we really work to help contextualize it to the way they need it and find value adds. So mainly Florida, but for key customers, we go out of state with them. And if somebody just wants the doors and then has somebody else doing the install, we'll ship it anywhere. So we ship stuff to the Bahamas before. We ship stuff to New York. It just depends on where the customer is. But from an installation standpoint, fairly regionalized. From following a customer somewhere and providing them the doors they need, pretty much anywhere.
Now, you arrived here not too long ago, really, and I imagine you have plans for technology and technology deployment, or maybe it was already, maybe there was something already operating there for you. But can you, just given your background and how technology has always been something that you've brought to the table, tell us about what's on your mind here.
For sure. So yeah, I stepped right into the middle of them implementing a new ERP. They've been on about a 15 to 20-year-old version of Microsoft's ERP, and moving to Microsoft Dynamics now. And so it had sort of been slow go, and so heavy push to get that in place so we can get better data. Because that's something else that I don't know if I really covered through my experiences, but something I learned as I was going is Excel's great for a lot of things, and small and medium-sized businesses and large ones tend to really rely on it, in my opinion, more than they should. But what I learned when I stepped into my first CFO role is if you're going to scale a business, putting system, process, dashboarding, and technology in place in a repeatable way. And one of my favorite phrases is it scalable? Is it portable? If you can't scale it with the business and you can't port it to a business you acquire, it's not a good system or technology. And so that is definitely something we're focusing on right now. That's something over the next year that we will really work on, is getting a couple seats filled in the team that is needed for growth, and then getting good baseline systems in place, getting good reporting, because it was and still is in some ways very Excel driven, but we're very rapidly moving toward a much more automated set. So yeah, big focus there.
It might be good to understand better, what are the metrics that matter to you, and the numbers that you're looking at daily. I mean, is it number of doors in inventory, sales outstanding? What would it be?
Yeah, so I think for me, it's more big picture looking forward stuff. Yes, we can measure sales volumes, and we're looking at tracking our budget versus actual on our sales. For me, it is we really try and manage our human capital ratio well. So making sure that we keep our labor component in line with our top line revenues and our GP targets. And that's something, and I just stepped into this company 5 months ago. So, but from a historical context, this company weathered the COVID environment very, very well because they were smart about managing that human capital ratio. There didn't have to be much downsizing, and they were able to pass through it very effectively while holding a little shrinkage on the top line, but holding profitability. And then it's just going right back pretty much to where it was on the other side, because the human capital ratio of the business was really managed well. But on the other side of it, it's an inventory turn aspect, right? That's really important. We have a lot of different SKUs in order to manufacture the materials that we have. Another big thing, and I don't know how much construction type people you've had on here before, but construction accounting is a unique animal in that you're not recognizing cost at the time of sale. There's what's the concept of earned revenue versus billed revenue. So there's a concept of, for example, if you have $1 million job and you've incurred $1 million that costs in a job and you've incurred $100,000, you can recognize 10% of the revenue. So it's based off of your cost complete. And then you have your billings. So maybe you're able to bill more than that. And so you have a concept of over under billings. And so looking at cash is so crucial in the construction industry because you could have bought a ton of materials that you aren't able to bill a customer for yet. And cash flowing, it's crucial. So cash flow is another one. Really looking ahead. Those are the ratios and the things that are just the basic foundations, but there'll be more as we grow. Some of it, based off of the older systems we have, is hard to even get in a quality way. So that's why I'm honestly a little more focused on the technology than some of the metrics I want to look at, because I don't have quality enough data yet to measure them the way I want.
And whenever a finance leader steps into a new role, you step in here again, just towards the early part of the year. Was there a particular number that maybe you thought? I'm going to ask it sort of the other way now. I'm going to say, well, maybe there was a number that you thought was being ignored, and you thought, we need to be paying closer attention to this, or part of the organization needed to be sensitized about the number, and maybe we're just ignoring it. I don't know. But is there a number or a metric that you have sought to raise the profile of, whether with your finance team or another part of the organization?
I think this company had some consultants help really focus them on some of the key metrics around like GMROI, which is an important inventory turn, and the backlog component, which backlog in construction means I've booked this amount of work that I still have to do. I think the one that I'm most focused on, and it's a very cash strong company, so it's not too much of an issue right now. It's very cash strong, fairly debt averse company, is being able to look at cash ahead. So for me, cash, because if we want to grow, knowing what's coming and when our cash flow could get tight is key. So I think focusing on cash is a big one for me, even though right now it's not a problem at all. And not that it would be at any point, but if you're going to grow even at 10 to 15% a year, there could be some cash constraints. So cash on a rolling basis, not just what was cash on the balance sheet today, but that whole 13-week cash forecast is a piece that I'm really driving toward us doing well, because if you can't measure cash 3 months out, you can't be ready for what's coming. And so it's putting all those pieces in place to be able to get to that, because honestly, I can't get a quality number there yet. I can get a rough number, but not a quality number. And that's a really important one for me. And I've seen it through every business I've scaled with, in order to not end up in a situation of very profitable but out of business.
Excellent. Now, you mentioned human capital earlier. I mean, is in a company this size, I would think things get around when you lose certain key individuals.
Mm-hmm.
But is there an employee churn number, or is there something the
We have very, very, very low turnover. I mean, an average tenure of an employee here is 20 years. So, yes, we've seen a little bit of turn in the great resignation period that we're in right now. But we've also been able to backfill a couple of those seats, and we've actually been able to bring in a couple other really high quality people. We haven't, knock on wood, lost anybody that's a really, really valuable. And every person in our company, because we're not huge, we're only 60 to 70 people, so we're not a big company right now. We will grow some as we grow, but
so that really low churn number is something we associate with family-owned companies where people have really,
mhm,
uh, lined up their personal life and professional life side by side, and
exactly.
kind of, have reached some harmony with to stay that long. At least that's the way I would put it.
And that's what I've seen from my different companies as well, is the ones that are really family focused. And also, I think there may be a perception in the marketplace that family owned business doesn't always attract the top talent. I haven't seen that. I've worked with some tremendously bright people that have helped me do some amazing things. Um, Maybe it's just somebody who doesn't want to be, you got 3 days to close the financials, because you can close finance a little bit closer in a privately held company. You don't have 3 days to close financials, and it's not going to be an 80-hour week this week. I think it's people looking a little bit for that work life balance, but yet it's still a great place for opportunity.
Oh, how are you looking into the future? Have you taken steps to help take the forecasting function to the next level?
Hmm. Working on the foundation of it. It's going to be a little slower than I'd like. We have to get this new accounting system in place before I can really forecast the way I want. Yeah, I can do big picture forecasting, but I like to build a really in-depth forecasting tool set. So that will happen over time. Over the next 12 to 24 months, I definitely have a roadmap of systems and um, meeting cadence and deliverables that will roll out piece by piece that will allow us to do what we need to do. So yes, I definitely have sight set on a vision of how we want to forecast and what we need to do to get there. But again, it's that foundation, right? So I'm on the basis of the foundation to build to do that.
Are you, and I think you are, but I'm going to ask you this question. Again, we've described the company being family owned, 90 years. You're new to the company. And you want that lines of sight into the future. You in the past we characterized you sort of as a technology champion. Here you have to play the role, and it must be sometimes delicate, where you have to convince everyone that this new piece of technology is worth the investment to learn how to use, to learn how to what the output from it will promise to bring the company in terms of value. How am I doing? Is this a part of your mindset as far as this is the role I play? This is what I need to do?
100%. Every company I've gone to, I very carefully vetted to make sure they were technology forward in their mindset because I knew if I went to a place that didn't want to change that, I was going to struggle. I wasn't going to align with their values. So every company I've worked at has had that. Now, every company I've worked at, part of what I think my role is, and most people wouldn't say a CFO is a salesperson. Part of my role is to sell internally why this matters. It's to align the culture and the mindset with it. So yes, I view that as a tremendous part of my job, and honestly, I view that as a tremendous part of most CFOs' roles going forward because a lot of them are playing the technology world. And so it's not just number crunching anymore. It's just as much about getting people's buy in to change and to get the information them needed in order to facilitate business growth.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you sort of underscoring that for us because I think too often we give too much credit to champions of change in companies that we know are dynamic and we know have made changes frequently over the last decade. But to drive change in a family-owned 90-year-old company is different. And again, the employees who stay with it as long as they have are frankly can be set in their ways at times and not always as open to change. As long as you begin the discussion and demonstrate you're a change agent for a company like this, I think you deserve maybe an extra stripe on your sleeve just to say that it happens differently in this type of company. So anyway, is that okay? Is that a compliment or
I'll take it. I mean, it's one of the things that I think I do well, so I'll take it. Getting in a company like this, in a privately held company, that's maybe not thousands of people, even though one of the companies I worked at had over 1,000 people. So been there, done that. But it's about getting people's buy-in, right? You can't just go force a new technology down their throat because that's what the public shareholders want. It's getting the buy-in for those employee base and having them speak into it so that it's not just me as the outsider coming in and say, we have to change, we have to change. It's we have to change, but let's do it together. Let's figure out here. I know what we need, but here's where we can flex. If this is something you need, it makes your life easier. Let's work on this together and get it to where we all get to accomplish what the goal is at the end of the day.
all right. Well, Jason, thank you for allowing me to throw a few extra questions your way there. Uh, what we're up to what we refer to as our finance strategic moment question, and this might have happened any time during the course of your career, and it's just where your lines of sight into the the construction world allowed you to see an opportunity or a risk, and you were able to respond to it, whether organizationally or maybe it's just your team that you pointed in a different direction. Don't know, but anything come to mind when we ask for a finance strategic moment?
Yeah, and this is going to tie a little bit to technology again, but I think I mentioned earlier that I realized Excel was not the place to drive the business out of. Excel is a great tool for analyzing things, but at the bridge builder, they were growing dramatically, and you either going to add a tremendous amount of labor overhead to support that Excel growth and keep those spreadsheets up to date so the information made sense, or you're going to layer in smart systems. We already had a good accounting system. It was just getting that information out for reporting and analytics and the forecasting piece. And that's where I think was sort of a strategic insight. And again, this is where I think maybe the construction industry lags behind other industries, and this is something other industries are already doing. But we layered in a financial planning and analysis tool set on top that we were able to build out a tremendous amount of transparency in. And coupling with that, it was speeding up the availability of the data. So rather than looking through the rearview mirror so quickly, it was saying, all right, because in that company, most was self-performed. What that means, that is, most of it, we either were doing the labor, buying the material, it was our own equipment. So it was our cost, it was our risk. Because those type contracts tend to be a fixed price. So you better know your cost. So in that type of environment, the quicker you can know how your cost is trending on the job, the quicker you can react to things going south or getting better. And so really pushed in that company for us to get payroll processed daily. So historically, a lot of construction companies maybe get their payroll into their accounting system once a week. We had it in the next morning. So you were getting 12-hour-old data that we then layered a financial planning and analysis tool set on top of, and then layered forecasting on. So for that business, that was tremendous to understanding job performance. And when you have multi-$100-million jobs that last 5 years, you really want to know how they're trending and if they're going the right direction and if you're missing somewhere versus what you estimated. So creating that line of sight and visibility was something that I deeply learned there and have carried forward everywhere I've gone since.
Hi, it's Jack, and we hope you're enjoying our discussion with Jason Keene, CFO of Mills in Nebraska. Also, just to let you know, we'll be dropping our next episode of Workplace Champions later this week. Again, Workplace Champions is our podcast for talent-minded business leaders. We'll be featuring 4 of our recent CFOs featured on CFO Thought Leader as part of that episode. And before I forget, we know few things are more valuable than your time. And so thank you for listening.
Okay, we're going to jump to our mentoring round where I ask you several quick questions intended to inform and inspire future finance leaders. We're wondering when you first took on a CFO role and had all of the responsibilities on your docket, if you could go back in time and think about that first 30 days where you took on those responsibilities, what advice would you give yourself?
I think one of the key things that I wish I'd known before becoming a CFO for the first time is you can't push change and you can't push, whether it be financially metric driven, whether it be technologically driven, whether it be cultural driven, as quickly as you want. People aren't going to want to move as fast as you are or work as much as you're going to want to. And quality people is such a crucial thing to the business. And I understood that, but not to the level that I did when I stepped in as a CFO. So I wish somebody had told me beforehand, focus on the people, get the right people in place, and set a reasonable time frame for change. Yes, we're going quickly, but it's not going to be the end of the world if this system or this metric is not being tracked regularly 30 days from now rather than 10. So pace of change in people was something I wish somebody had really pointed me to even more than I knew at that point.
We like to ask our guests to reflect a little bit on the personal side as well, wondering if there's something you do or something that sets you apart. Is there a personal habit, something you're known for? Anything come to mind when we ask for a personal habit or routine?
I am a very routine-driven person. So there's a gentleman called Jocko Willink who has a book called Extreme Ownership. And in there, he has the concept of discipline equals freedom. Not discipline to the level of every 10 minutes I can tell you what I'm going to do in my day, but I definitely block and tackle my calendar. So there's days set aside for certain types of recurring meetings. There's days set aside for the flexibility meetings. There's times of days blocked out for family. I'm going to leave the office unless it's emergency by a certain time of day, unless I know there's something coming up, and then it gets blocked out. So pretty rigid in my calendar to drive me being effective at what I'm doing. Very process driven in the way I handle email and tasks. So I follow the concept of inbox zero. At the end of every day, my inbox is empty. It's either in something for future reference or it's in my task management solution. To me, just like I said, Excel is not a database. Outlook is not a task tool. And so time management, using my time well, health and wellness is a big thing for me as well. Just living a fairly structured approach so that I have that flexibility to enjoy life when I want to, because I learned the hard way that you can overwork and that you can let the business take control of your life. And so there has to be a balance. You have to be productive and deliver. And that's why I follow that tight structure. But at the same time, you have to have blocked out important things that are focused on your personal and your family as well. And that's allowed me to do that. And that's really, really important to me.
Uh, we always like to ask if you have a book recommendation. I think you just mentioned one, actually.
Well, I mean, I can give you more than one if you want, so that's not a problem.
How about one more?
So that one's focused on structure and discipline, right? There's several other ones that I really like around focusing on what's important. Deep Work by Cal Newport, again, focusing on blocking out time to focus on what's deep and important. Start with Why by Simon Sinek. That gets back to getting people's buy-in. So understanding the why. Essentialism. So again, focusing on what matters. I learned that you can only tackle so much at once. And so essentialism really explains that concept. And then the last one is I'm an introvert. Probably a lot of CFOs are. Even though I don't mind talking in front of people or doing podcasts like this, but I'm an introvert. And so there's a book called Quiet that talks about the power of an introvert and how to manage that well, which really spoke to me. So those are some that I've loved and are ones that I give to people a lot to help them out.
And Quiet is trying to offer you how to leverage your introvertness as a strength,
Exactly.
or is it trying to convert you?
It's more the first one. It's, introverts can get up in crowd of people, get public speaking and be perfectly fine. It's helping them understand where their energy come from. So again, and so you can structure your calendar to recharge, because the world requires and executive leadership requires sitting with people and extroversion in some way or factor a lot. So finding what refills your tank, for lack of a better term, so that you can be effective when needing to be effective within a group, and how to manage that.
Great. Interesting choice. We haven't had it before, and I do think it's a book that the finance and accounting realm would find of interest. So thank you for that. And we're up to our final question. We're going to ask you to look forward finally the next 12 months. And if you can, identify for us what your priorities are as CFO.
So if I'm sitting here talking to you a year from now, we will have gotten our ERP in place. We will have layered in a strong forecasting tool set. And we'll have that foundation in place to grow the way we want to. Now, does that mean I don't have additional systems and process I want to put in place? No, but having those baseline meetings in place, having those core systems and really quality data and structure in place, and having that analytics engine to support the model of growth. Those are the three things that I'm going to focus on and get done in the next 12 months, because to me, it goes back to that essentialist concept, right? Those are the three biggest things for the company to grow the way they want to going forward. So those are where I'm going to put my efforts.
Jason King, thank you for joining us on CFO Thought Leader.
Thank you.
Hello, listeners. Do us a favor. Be certain to subscribe to CFO Thought Leader on Apple Podcasts, or if you're an Android user, check us out on Spotify or Google Play. If you like the show, please recommend it to a friend.